Let's go to this story. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will explain the country's financial situation today. His medium-term budget statement is expected to include plans to fix the embattled power utility Eskom, the demands of public sector wage increases and the extension of social grants. The country's ailing economy has been a concern for some time now. To discuss this further, we're joined by economist Frank Blackmore, who's joining us from KPMG virtually. Mr. Blackmore, thank you very much for your time. I'm assuming because of what's been happening, we should expect that expenditure will increase?
Yes, I think expenditure will increase, not only given this time of year and the fact that we've got a bit of revenue. This is how government tends to work in a way. And the number of ends for those funds don't reduce. So if there is a list of priorities, as one falls off, perhaps two join that government priority list.
So there's talks, Mr. Blackmore, about government taking on some of the debt by Eskom. Should we expect that to be something that bitter pill? Will we have to swallow it as citizens? We've got a lot to say about Eskom.
Yeah, look, we're going to have a bitter pill. Either we leave things as they are and we have bitter load shedding, or, we allow another 30+% increase on tariffs for that electricity that is intermittent, or we do something about it permanently. And I think this is perhaps the first sort of practical step towards doing something about the problem. Eskom is so indebted, it cannot go to the market and borrow more. Plus, a lot of its funding on a month-on-month basis goes towards servicing its 400 billion odd debt. And what this would do is remove some of that debt. There's still speculation only in the market about how much that would be, but let's say we halve that debt. It would, reduce their payments by half and allow that money to go towards perhaps capital expenditure, maintenance expenditure, all the things that we need to keep the lights on. And perhaps signal to the private sector that, look, we're doing something decisive in this regard, join us in that respect, and let's solve this issue, because I think South Africa, more than anything, needs growth over the next couple of years. We've got so many unemployed people that need to contribute. We need to grow the pie, and the way to do that, well, you can't do that without power supply.
And he obviously has the job now of reframing his budget from what he presented earlier on this year, right? He has to reframe because we've had a very chaotic 2022. Some of it has nothing to do with us, but obviously we are then affected. How would you see him reframing the budget? What is it that you see could change quicker to assist our economy?
Well, I think, all budgets are like that, and that's why I think we get an opportunity in the cycle to do a mini budget and adjust to changing circumstances. It should be remembered that when the original budget was put out in February this year, the invasion of Ukraine hadn't taken place, and the aftermath of that, in terms of, global inflation rising, higher interest rates, those are very critical issues that would result in some shifting about in a national budget situation. And so what I think this budget perhaps is now that we're over COVID and we've sort of adjusted to what's happened with the war in Ukraine, the minister can actually get down back to sort of longer-term budgeting and thinking about the sort of dual goals of trying to grow this economy on the one side and also looking after those who are not included in the economy at this point in time through social wages, etc.
And, the revenue, are you expecting that to rise? Many banks are saying about 8% increase in revenue. What's your prediction?
Yeah, look, I haven't done a calculation myself, but I've also, for two reasons, speculate that there would be an increase in revenue. And the one is, again, I think the resource industries have done pretty well and possibly contributed more than their fair share, as they have over the past 2 years. So I expect an increase there, or more revenues to come in. And the second one is, of course, inflation. If you have a loaf of bread at 10 Rand, and that goes up 10%, the like the VAT on that would also go up 10%, and then just in nominal terms, because of our higher inflation, should also pull in more revenue than originally thought in February.
And of course, the finance minister has a very tough task ahead of him, because the entire globe is looking like it's entering into a technical recession.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, we're still trying to deal with the aftermaths of things that happen, well, in electricity's sake, decades ago, but for the rest of the economy globally and locally has been, COVID and Ukraine and the knock-on effects of that. And of course, with high interest rates, the expectation is for lower growth, because it costs businesses more to borrow and it costs consumers more to borrow, and therefore one expects expenditure in those two segments of the economy, which are pretty significant, to slow down, and therefore lower growth expectations. But we know that is a cyclical phenomenon. All we can do is try and prepare ourselves for when things turn, and we are able for a change to take advantage of a higher level of growth, which we need to address a lot of the problems that we have.
And of course, a lot of people, especially people who became unemployed because of the lockdown and COVID-19, are hoping that he continues to extend the social relief of distress grant. And I don't know what you think around that. Do we have capacity and the money to be able to do that, looking at the fact that state-owned enterprises and employees there have been striking quite a lot lately? The PSA is threatening to shut down. So it means that budget is also going to swell up in terms of people's salaries. And then there's also departments, for instance, who are not actually using their budgets.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think, as I mentioned before, in South Africa, one can't ignore either the current needs in terms of looking at the social wage and looking after those not participating in the economy, as well as considering how we're going to grow this economy in future. So you've got to balance both of those things out, which makes, I think, the South African situation pretty tricky. Yeah. We do see that because of the additional revenues that the minister probably will have at his disposal, that he is able to continue with the social relief of distress grant. There was also some debate or questions asked in the market about whether this will become a basic income grant. We don't think that will be the case. I don't think we're on that higher growth path that would allow us the revenues to be able to pay for something like that at this stage. So for now, perhaps an extension in the SRD grant for a while longer, but also focusing on those capital expenditures that are required. And then, as you said, the fly in the ointment here is going to also be what happens to public sector wages.
Yeah.
Currently, the offer on the table is 3%. It makes up a substantial, in other words, more than a third of our total budget goes to that wage bill. And I think generally people wouldn't be concerned with it if they felt they were getting services commensurate with that type of budget allocation. But I think that's where the questioning starts. It's a complicated issue. It's not only about the potential increase, but also relative to other sectors, relative to inflation, relative to productivity increases. One has to look at these things from many angles.